Well, hey, what's up, plant people? You have found yourself at episode 1 of the Planthropology podcast, the show where we dive into the lives, careers, and general awesomeness of some really cool plant people. And my name's Dr. Vikram Baliga. I'm your host, and this is one of maybe 2 or 3 times I will ever call myself Dr. Vikram Baliga, because I'm kind of not that guy who does that. But hey, I'm reporting to you right now from the future, sort of. This podcast evergreen content thing is weird. And I just wanted to give you a couple of notes about some of these early episodes. You've probably heard podcasts where the hosts get on and apologize for their first episode for whatever reason. And this ain't that, y'all. It's not. I'm actually really proud of all of the episodes that are out there. But I will admit that the first few that went up, I didn't have my general format down. I didn't really know what I was doing as an interviewer, as a producer, as a host. My guests have been great all the way through. So you're going to love all of them. But what I would say is, as you're forming your opinion about this podcast and about plants, you may not love plants yet, but I know you're going to, because there are some great guests, some wonderful scientists, professionals, students, plant enthusiasts, everyone and anyone that has something to do with plants or nature or the environment. You're going to learn so much from these folks. And I hope that you'll really give this podcast a chance as you go through it. Again, I love this episode. Kyle Tengler, who's the guest in this one, is one of my best friends, and I think that you're going to love him as much as I do. But again, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't. And so I'm not great sometimes, especially in these early episodes, driving the conversation where it needed to go and keeping us on track. I'm still probably not great at that. But I would recommend, if you are just getting into the show, that you listen to episode 1 and then you jump forward in time and listen to some of the most recent episodes as well. I think that'll give you a full picture of where the show was and where the show has gone. And then I hope you go back and start at episode 2 and listen all the way through, because there is so much to learn, so much appreciation and passion for plants and nature that comes from the wonderful people that I've gotten to interview over the past couple of years. So this is just to say that I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you're listening. And I think you are really going to love Planthropology. Those are just my tips for listening to the show. Listen to episode 1, jump forward and listen to whatever the most recent couple of episodes are to, get a feel for where we are, and then fill in the gaps. But I know that I already like you, and I know that we're going to be friends. So enjoy the show, and I will see you in the future. I still don't know how this time thing works. What is up, plant people? It is Tuesday, November 5th, and I'm just so glad you're with me today. This is Vikram Baliga, the host of Planthropology, and I am super excited that today is episode 1. I hope you've been sticking with us and listening to some of the previews we've put up and sound bites and funny pictures and things like that. I hope you entered our giveaway to win some stickers and to have me answer a question for you on episode 2 at the beginning of the episode. I'm not going to belabor this too much, but it's episode 1 with Kyle Tengler, who is an old friend of mine and just one of the most intelligent and interesting guys I know. And I'm just really excited for you to hear this conversation I had with him. A couple of quick things before we get started. I appreciate you listening. I'm glad you're being a part of this, and I can't wait to see where this goes. So if you haven't followed us on social media, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and do that. That's a big help for us. We'll talk a little bit more about where to find us at the end. Also, any comments you have as you listen to this, keep track of things that you think I could do better, of ways that we can improve the show. I'm always all ears for that kind of thing. But thanks for listening. I'm not going to blabber at you too much. I just want to get to the show. So episode 1 coming at you from Kyle Tengler. How long have we been friends, Kyle?
I want to say, I started working in the department in 2009. And I think I encountered you maybe a year after I started working for the department.
That could be, because I started my master's in 2010, I think.
Yeah, so that lines up
Yeah.
perfectly. I met you and our mutual friend Becky,
Yeah.
Dr. Becky,
Dr. Becky.
I think about the same time. So
Yeah, and she'll be a guest sooner or later.
Oh,
Probably.
so I have to be on the same kind of podcast that
You do, I'm
somebody
sorry.
like Becky.
Yeah, someone like her.
Okay.
So I apologize.
No, it's perfect.
So hopefully at this point you have listened to the intro episode, but the point of this podcast is to tell stories about plant people. I'm a plant nerd. You know, I've been a plant nerd for a long time. I'll probably die a plant nerd someday. I will die someday.
I mean,
Probably.
it's a little early to tell.
Yeah. There's still time.
Let's not call it yet.
We won't call it yet. It'll be fine. But the goal is to tell the stories of plant people, right? So there's a lot of science podcasts out there, and they're all really good. But most of them, I think, focus on subject matter. Not most of them, but a lot of them focus on the subject matter and talk about the science, and that's great. But what I'm interested in is to see why people care about the things they care about and got into plant science. And I can tell I told my story on the intro episode, and I'm sure it'll come up again. But so we'll start off. Just introduce yourself a little bit further. Tell us what you're doing and all of that.
I am, like I said, Kyle Tengler. I went to Texas Tech here. I had a weird path into plants. I actually did my undergrad in computer science and mathematics, and it was actually during my undergrad studying computer science, I got really. This is going to be really nerdy. You'll appreciate this. You remember?
This is a
Alton,
plant podcast.
You know Alton Brown, the Good
Yes.
Eats guy. He's like one of. I never really, besides the French Chef, I never really loved a lot. Completely loved a lot of cooking shows. But then Good Eats came, and it was so science based and everything, and I never really got into cooking or food generally until I started watching his show, and I was a poor undergraduate student, and he's cooking with all these cool ingredients and everything, and I'm like, how do I do that? How do I get to there?
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I can grow those things. I can just grow the ingredients, since I can't go find a really Castelluto Genovese tomato or something like that.
I don't have any idea what you just said.
Come on, Castelluto
No, I
Genovese.
have no idea what that means. What does that mean?
It's a really gnarly tomato.
Okay.
And if I wanted to cook, if I wanted to work with these more heirloom, I mean, at the time you have to remember this is 2009 in Lubbock, Texas. This is pre-Market Street being a real thing, and there was maybe the one on 50th Street.
Maybe.
And
It's
they
pretty much the dark ages.
It was it's crazy how, I mean, I guess now that I think about it, that was a decade ago, but it wasn't that long ago that we were kind of in the dark ages of going and getting gourmet things in Lubbock.
Oh, well, no, that's absolutely true. And so, I imagine a lot of the folks listening are Lubbock locals, but if you're not, we're up here on the high plains and Texas.
It's blowing up quick here. There's a lot of modern conveniences here, but those are relatively
We got
recent.
a street light. No, there's 300,000 people in Lubbock County, so it's not tiny, but it's only in the last, like you said, 10 years or so that we've kind of gotten the foodie scene and some of these other things that real cities have.
Yeah, our culture is catching up to our population level.
I think that's a good way to say that.
But so at the time I didn't have access to those things, so I just went to the Texas Tech library, the university library, and I hadn't taken any courses in anything plant related, never really gardened or anything like that. But I just started reading everything on gardening that I could find, and I just got super into it. And I wasn't good at gardening. I was really bad at it, but I was good at learning things.
Well, that's
why, when people talk about being a brown thumb or whatever, that's not a thing. That's totally
having a brown thumb is.
No.
I have two of them.
That's
I'm sorry.
The metaphorical brown thumbs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll edit that out.
And so that's kind of how I got my foot in the door. I just started gardening and killing plants, and then learned how to not kill plants and everything. And so this is funny. My grandmother, and it was mainly because I wanted to learn how to cook good foods on a budget. And so I was doing everything as low budget as possible and everything. And my sweet, awesome grandmother, she had been walking around the gardens here around 2009, and she saw that they were hiring here for just a greenhouse assistant. And so she's like, you should go do that. You want to make money while you're an undergrad. You should just go work in the greenhouse, and you'll learn, and it'll be fun. And so that's what I did. And then once I started I started working it with plants before I ever pursued any education in plants. And it was all uphill or downhill from there. It depends on your interpretation.
It's all about perspective, right? So, yeah. So we're sitting here in my office at the tech greenhouse in Lubbock, America, and the background noises I'm sure you'll hear are like carts going down the hallway and all those things. And so it's it tends to be pretty active around here sometimes, day to day.
The peaks are extremely excitable. It gets intense,
and then it's cool for a while. Then it chills out. So, so right now, so you got your bachelor's and your master's, correct?
Yeah. Eventually, in 2015, I finished my my master's in horticulture. So yeah, I finished up the computer science degree and everything. But then I don't know. I really fell in love with plants, and it wasn't so, growing plants is the thing I always tell people, like the thing that's so cool about horticulture and gardening and everything related to gardening is it kind of like oozes on to all these other things. You get interested in sustainability, and then you get interested in soil science and all these other things that aren't necessarily like, they're not directly the cultivation of a plant.
Right.
You get to learn a lot more about, soil physics, and you get into all these things, and it's such a big thing. I just, it got me. I got bit by the bug, and
yeah. Well, no, it happens, and I think that's something we'll discuss quite a bit on this podcast, is just how variable this industry is, right? Everything from the soil to the plate is kind of, that's the way I look at it. But it's more than that, because we'll talk, I'm sure, to like agronomists and people that wear clothes or make clothes or make the things that make clothes. Hopefully, everyone I talk to that comes in here wears clothes. That should be a rule, because we're on campus and in public and all those things.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the hour that you do.
The middle, it's what, 4:02. So this is probably, I guess it depends. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Who knows? Mm-hmm. I think everyone will wear clothes. I think I'm going to make that a rule. So, so now you're pursuing medical school.
Yes.
How does that marry up with like the other degrees you've had?
It seems kind of weird, right? Computer science to horticulture, and then getting interested in biology and medicine. And really, they kind of go, to me, they went hand in hand. It was like a natural progression, just because the thing that really got me into plants originally was food. I liked food. I wanted to be able to cook really well and cook for other people, and there's an entertainment aspect, but I also wanted to just do it for myself. It was like a skill acquisition thing.
Right.
And then once I started learning more about plants in general, like learning about health and how diet affects your health and everything, that kind of came onto the radar and everything. And it's really, it's mind blowing how little, me looking back, how little I ever connected. I know it's like a really silly thing, as two people in there. I don't know how old you are now, but
I'm 32.
So two people in their 30s, at least I did not ever really think about diet and health whenever I was an undergrad or anything like that. And it's only more recently I've gotten really into that. And then of course, my excursions before grad school. So before I started grad school, between the horticulture degree and the computer science degree, I went to Australia to pursue a certification in permaculture design.
Yeah, I remember that.
And because I was really into sustainable design. How do we live on this planet in a way that's just not going to completely trash it?
We're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Really
There's a lot of challenges in there. And but then that gets into, in studying permaculture, a lot of permaculture itself was looking at old societies. There's really no new ideas in permaculture. And that's the whole idea. It's like, we don't need to know. The reason we have problems in the world is not because of a lack of information.
Right.
That's never the problem. It's application. Are you doing the things we know how to do? Everything we need to do, we know how to do. So that's kind of what drew me to permaculture, is like, you're looking at all kind of a catalog of all the tools that all these other societies, these older ancestral societies and tribal groups and whatnot, the tools that they developed to stay in their environments and thrive along with their environment, instead of destroying their environment or degrading it.
Right.
And so I did that. And then, of course, during my master's degree, I went to do stuff in Kenya. And, of course, there, the idea was like to grow food, to teach people how to grow food who, if they didn't get food, they were going to die.
That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, like whenever I'm just gardening in my backyard as a undergrad and everything, it's just fun.
Right.
But then you're confronted with like it gets serious.
Yeah.
And at that point, this is not like for funsies. Like
you're right.
There are people that I met on those trips that are not going to be there now. So it really like hammered home the impact of food and health, and then you see what these people are doing in terms of their diet and so on and so forth. The other lifestyle things that are going on too, and how it's affecting their health, and it really starts kind of like get the gears turning. You start really thinking about like not only how does horticulture and agriculture affect human health, but how does anthropology, how did the way that we've evolved with culture and throughout society and in the context of our environments, how did that inform the way that we interact with the world now, and how does that affect our health? And also like it gets even more complicated because when I was always interested in the culture of plants and the soil and sustainability, and then you start really, as you get older, you start really getting to like the political side. Like there's so much of this that's policy driven, and so that's like you were saying, this goes everywhere, right?
Yeah.
There's very few topics untouched whenever you explore plant culture.
Well, and I'm glad you said the word anthropology, because this podcast is called Planthropology, and the name for that, and actually the idea for that came because we were one day up at the greenhouse, but it probably was 6 months ago. I don't know exactly. Mm-hmm. Just talking about mesquite trees, which are, depending on who you ask, a native tree in our area or not, right? Mm-hmm. And then we started to skin. I don't want to.
And I can never let this pass. Every time somebody starts talking about this, the conversation halts and we can't move on.
We're going to talk about it because I think it's really interesting, and that gave me that because we talked for a while, and at the at the end of the conversation, I was like, man, this would make a great podcast. Like, I think people would love to hear about this, mm-hmm. And then so I just started thinking about it, and so here we are, and that's kind of where the name came from. Is like. We have this long-term historical anthropological connection to the natural world around us, so the plants around us, and you talk to a lot of people. We teach this intro horticulture class here with 400 non-majors. Not all of them, but a lot of them are like, oh, it's just plants, right? It's just, but they're the basis for our entire ecosystem, the entire everything we eat. Everything we do.
Yeah, even if you don't eat any plants, you can't survive without plants.
No, exactly.
There's nothing you can do without plants.
They are the bottom end of our ecosystem, right? They're the base of our food chains.
And that should be like the basic. That's like the basic biology stuff. Like they're the producers, and then everything else is sitting on top of that. So that's every aspect of life.
So mesquite. Let's talk about mesquite. So if you come to Lubbock, Texas, and you talk to most people, and you go out and you drive around and look at mesquite trees, they'll say, oh, they're not native. They came up with the cattle drives, 400 or 500 years ago. Blah blah blah. We're a medium to short grass prairie here. Mm-hmm. But from your research and your knowledge, you have a different opinion on that.
Oh, completely. In fact, I would even cast a little bit of doubt. I don't want to say a complete doubt on the short grass prairie idea. And that's only from, just digging into historical accounts of the area. And I think this is the issue that I have as much of a native plant lover as that I am.
Oh yeah.
And
seriously.
And Vikram and I have both been involved with very, very passionately and deeply with native plants. As much as I'm into that stuff, I'm not a nativist.
Right.
I'm not one of those. I'm not a zealot when it comes to
zealot's a good word.
Because it really is. It's become like almost an ideology for some people, where if it's non-native, it cannot be in the landscape and it must be destroyed.
Right.
And whenever you start digging into it, like, well, what's native? And it's completely arbitrary. If it was here the day before, let's say Columbus, and we can argue about Columbus.
He was lost. Whatever.
So let's say, let's assume, which is not true, that Columbus was the first person to come to the Americas.
Sure, okay.
Of course, not true. But let's say that's the case, and that's what we're going to base our assumption about what is native or not. They say if it was here the day before Columbus arrived, then it's native. But if it came a day after they arrived, then it's non-native. If a bird was en route before he left, but then it deposited seeds from an island somewhere or something like that onto the Americas after the landing of Columbus, then a lot of people would consider that non-native. But that's arbitrary.
Right.
And also, like, there's this big assumption. The Llano Estacado is a perfect example where we're at now. All these early accounts describe it as this like endless plain of grass, endless sea, featureless sea of grass, right?
Sure.
And they say, oh, well, this is the pristine native landscape, as if there were no people here.
Right. No, exactly.
Like as if this was
exactly.
like, oh, and it's actually a little condescending, as if these people had no impact on the land, as if they weren't managing the land.
Sure.
We know that Native Americans had their own agriculture and land management practices, and they just had a different tool set. They didn't have tractors, they didn't have barbed wire fences. They had fire, they had
Right, exactly.
handmade tools and stuff like that. Those are the tools that they had. This is a managed landscape. And sure, whenever the first explorers came across the Llano Estacado, there's no doubt in my mind that it was the trees were far and few between, and it would make sense if it's a managed landscape. It's managed with fire. That's how, if you're primary. So like the Tejas, Teya, is it Teya?
I don't know.
The Native Americans.
I should know that, yeah.
I think it's Teyas.
Yeah.
One of course, this is a nexus of lots of Native American communities because it's a trading center. But that was the population that lived here. And if you look at most of these Native American cultures, if you look at the composition of their diet, it's primarily bison. It was
right, yeah.
and another game, like 85, depending on on which area you're looking at in the United States, because of course the climate varies so much. But anywhere from 85 to maybe 90% of the diet is coming from bison alone, and there's no cultivatable crops. There's no butternut squash. Where are the high calorie plants that they're going to be eating? There's so few native high calorie plants,
right?
And while people's further west, they're going to be cultivating corn and stuff like that. That wasn't happening on the Llano Estacado, as far as we can find evidence for. So they were managing grasslands to try and maximize bison, and also control the movement of the bison. So whenever you don't have fences, whenever you don't even have, at the time they didn't have horses. There was a native horse, but of course it was the native one had been extinct for a long time at that point. So they couldn't round up bison with European horses because they didn't have European horses.
It wasn't a thing.
It was managed with fire. And so, of course, like whenever you manage with fire, it's going to burn things that burn. And so you see, those early accounts, they find all these woody species really concentrated on the edges of the canyon, of the cap rock and everything, which makes perfect sense. Those are protected little areas. They're out of the way. And it's the same whenever we're doing, and I'm sure that you remember going on plant hunts.
Oh, yeah.
Going to look for wildflowers and stuff like that. Where are good places to look? The places where the mowers can't get. It's not that the plants just love to grow on those caliche rock sides or hillsides.
No, that's just where they can grow.
That's where they're allowed to grow because you can't mow those.
Right.
And it's the same with like the mesquite and hackberry and stuff like that.
Well, no, that's really interesting. And then because we control fire, right? We build houses and roads and all these things. Mm-hmm. And so we typically think, fire bad, but as part of an ecosystem, it's not. And it is a viable and management tool of land. Yeah,
and like this is, I don't want to get too, because the fire ecology is such a huge topic. And I think it's one that really needs to be explored. And I think, to me, I have a lot of, I would say, controversial opinions
I'm sure you do.
About fire ecology. But yeah, it is a tool. It's a low technology tool. It is technology, but you don't need really advanced machinery to use fire to control a landscape. Yeah. And like you said, our ability to control natural fires, of course, have really changed the face of the West.
For sure.
And but that's
a whole other.
We can get into that if you want.
That's a whole other discussion too.
But yeah, if you go like here at Lubbock Lake Landmark, they've got the fossil record goes back, I believe, to 13,000 years.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And that was one of the things me and you were talking about. The idea that Prosopis glandulosa is an introduced species from further south that's a hypothesis. Sure. And it's reasonable, except that whenever you talk to the anthropologists there, they say that there's evidence of mesquite here as far back as the fossil record goes. Now, does that mean that they were growing here? But maybe. Right. But also, if this is a trade center, the mesquite beans were used as a more, I would say probably more of a family food, because it's not as a complete of a food as something like bison is. But if you don't have bison, you're going to eat what you can, and that's a good source. And of course, mesquite provides fuel for fire and stuff like that.
Well,
too.
yeah,
So
and
building materials.
The seeds are a protein source. They're not, again, they're not like bison, but it can be ground into flour and all kinds of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Well, and just for context, if you're not familiar, if you're listening and not familiar with this area, we live up on top of this big mesa that we call the Llano Estacado. It's a big cap rock that runs about 260 miles north to south and drops off like at a pretty steady rate of about like 1% or less. Like it's very, very flat. Also runs, not quite as wide, but east to west into New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And then you get it to the edge of the cap rock and it just instantly drops about 1,000 feet.
Yeah, we're kind of like a weird place in Texas, because most of Texas is not at 3,300 feet.
No, right. We actually are pretty high. Mm-hmm. And, if you look at the landforms, there's some theories that this used to be a vast inland sea. Mm-hmm. And this big landform that we're on was the coastal area of this big inland sea, right? So if you look at some of the landforms off the side of the cap rock, there's lots of undulation, there's lots of rolls in the side of the mountains, where some of that, it could be streams, but some of that could be tidal flow and things like that. So, and then there's things like they've found seashells, ancient seashells and fossilized seashells and stuff in the landforms. And talking about the Lubbock Lake Landmark, it's an active dig site where they dig for mammoth fossils and other fossil records. And they found, I believe Scott out there was telling me they found like fossilized root material and beans and other parts of the mesquite tree that dated more than 10,000 years or close to 10,000 years or something like that. So it is interesting to think about, like,
and that's a really interesting topic, because climate change is a big topic right now, and everybody's talking about climate change. But one thing that we really need to appreciate, because right now when we think about anthropogenic climate change, we're thinking about fossil fuels and stuff like that. But there are other we sculpted together with the changing climate over the eons. Well, not we, but generations of Native Americans, because they were managing that landscape, and so that's going to affect the biodiversity and everything, and the hot spots and everything. Anyways.
But absolutely. Like there's, and this, I'm going to have you back on for sure, because there's a lot to discuss, but like, I just think it's interesting that I don't know, how much of the way that we approach the natural sciences is based in hubris? That's a big question, right?
that depends on who you talk to, but a lot of it, for sure. And I don't think people really appreciate. Well, a geneticist might, and a lot of biologists might really appreciate the elegance of how biology works. It's just so everything fits and all the way. The scale doesn't matter on the cellular level, all the way up to ecosystem level. The intricacy is so fascinating. And then we do things like introduce Opuntia cactus to Australia, and then it spreads everywhere, and we were like, and then maybe
and then cane toads,
cane toads, jackrabbits, stuff like that. Eats everybody's crops, and that's we're a little short sighted. That's I like to throw in a little plug. This is another controversial person, but Alan Savory, he's very, I guess he's not divisive, but people turn his message into a divisive message. His whole idea is that we should manage resources regardless of what they are holistically. And his whole, whenever he's looking at his primary interest is desertification, which of course has a tie-in. There's a feedback between desertification and climate change, and they feed back into each other, of course. And his whole take is like the main thing that causes desertification is just decision making, how we make decisions. And whenever you're looking at really complex systems, humans are categorically terrible at making decisions for complex systems, because we always reduce things so much. And the thing is, some systems can't be reduced.
Right.
You have to really take in the full complexity of those things. And if you just try and boil it down to a few factors, it gets complicated, which is why his textbook and everything. It's basically all about decision making and how do we make decisions in complex environments. And he actually like uses a lot of the methods that militaries have used over the past, because think about it, they're trying to win some mission or accomplish some mission. It's complicated. There's lots of moving parts. And so you kind of use that as a model for how you approach that. So, that's I don't know how I got.
No, it doesn't even matter. No, but no, I
the hubris thing. The hubris thing.
Right.
Like, whenever you simplify something and says, "Oh, there's this problem. Let me introduce this animal or this organism to this environment," and of course, it rarely goes very well.
No. Saying like, I know how to fix it. This is how you fix it.
But that comes back into the argument about the whole nativist thing. Right now, Salix has been introduced to Australia, and there is a lot of the nativists there. There's a lot of people really up in arms about it. They want it eradicated. But if you have an eroding stream bank or something like that, you'd be hard pressed to find a faster growing plant that's going to anchor that stream bank super quickly, super cheaply, really easily. And so the utility of it is there. And so like, is that appropriate? I think that's real. And that's when you have to get into the complex decision making stuff. Is this an appropriate tool to use? Personally, I think it's probably a good tool.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So Salix is willow, correct?
Yes,
the willow genus. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's interesting, and I think that I purposefully didn't come into this with much of a plan, and because I enjoy like personally conversations like this that go where they go, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's more. I don't know. It's more organic. It kind of drives the way I think it needs to, and but I think we'll just do a few more minutes and kind of wrap up, but kind of goes fast. But the ethics of the way that we manage the landscape, and so you were talking about earlier, to kind of bring it back a little bit, how you originally got passionate about this or got into this whole green industry, so to speak, mm-hmm. From computer science, because you wanted to be able to grow your own food, right? And so like, and whenever you get really into gardening, you really learn it's the practice of transformation. That's what it is, and there's something really like invigorating about that as a concept. Yeah. Well, and then you start to talk about this is another discussion we won't get too far into, but the ethics and the whole concept of growing your own food and growing local foods. And I'm very involved in our local food markets here. Like, that's a big thing I do. But then there's a lot of people out there in the big round soggy planet that we have that don't necessarily have the I don't know what the right way to say it though is like the luxury to grow food in the way that we do necessarily. We're like, in the way, if you're looking at like the industrial scale that we're able to grow food at, and you're looking at the efficiency, that's a thing that that's such an interesting topic. There's a lot of things that we could poo-poo about modern industrial agriculture, or even just taking modern industrial tools and even applying it to small scale. Because think about how much easier a small scale vegetable farm would be if you have a little push tractor or something like that. Yeah. That integrating like modern technologies into even smaller scale stuff makes things infinitely more efficient, right, in terms of time and money. And that's things that we probably maybe some people don't fully appreciate. There are groups of people out there, really passionate environmentalists out there, and I would consider myself a very passionate environmentalist. Sure, yeah. But at the same time, like, these are people who it's hard for them to understand like that they're going to Whole Foods and getting these foods that are a product of the efficiencies that we have now and everything. Sure. And at the same time, some people want to demonize agriculture, and I certainly have been guilty of that myself. But I think it really takes a critical eye to say like, what should we be doing, and what shouldn't we be doing, and it is to appreciate the efficiency that Western agriculture has attained. It's awesome. It's incredible. Well, and and I think of it this way, that like I can, personally, I'm at a point in my life where if I want to go to the farmer's market or and pay $4 a pound for tomatoes that I know where they've grown, I've seen the farm, all of that, I can do it. Mm-hmm. But on a global scale, that may not be a thing, even on a local and national scale. Like, and that's a really good point, because I actually think that in
like Western communities, it's the rural places in Western places that are probably the least capable of doing some of those things, which kind of seems counterintuitive, because if you go into a less developed world, growing your own food is not that big a deal, even, no matter how rural you are. In fact, the more rural you are, the more likely you are that you're probably going to do it. And there's a lot of like policy and even like a national, or like I want to say like there's national behavior or Western behavior things,
right? Yeah, just a cultural thing.
Yeah, definitely cultural aspects of some of that too. That's a really good point. Not everybody has access to a farmer's market necessarily, or let's say you want to talk. I think grass-fed beef is awesome.
Oh yeah,
super awesome. Now, do I think that most people can afford or even have access to grass-fed beef? Absolutely not. No. Absolutely not. So we have to keep that stuff in mind whenever talking about human health, and I think that's where things seemingly get complicated, but there are a lot of ways to simplify that. Like we have a diabetes epidemic,
sure,
and not just I think you'd be hard pressed to find a developed or developing nation that doesn't have a huge problem with diabetes, and it's something that costs so much money in terms of like just the public medical costs and everything.
Yeah.
And of course, what is that? It's mostly, not 100%. I'm speaking primarily like of type 2 diabetes. Primarily what we eat. Sure. It's the most basic of human behaviors, and the thing that we have to do to survive is killing and causing all kinds of secondary illnesses and stuff in all these people. And that's, I think people in horticulture have a huge capacity to help with that kind of thing, because it's the things. People aren't getting diabetic. People aren't getting diabetic eating kale salads and carrots and stuff like that.
Yeah, I try not to eat many kale salads, but that's okay.
Me neither, as you well know.
Oh, that's true.
I'm
not a plant eater, really.
Yeah, I'm a lover of plants. I have ever since Bill Mollison, the founder of the permaculture movement, he did this documentary forever ago. One of the things he said at the end, he was talking about keeping chickens, and he said, "You don't eat your friends." Talking about laying chickens. You eat meat chickens, but you don't eat your friends. And so that's one of my things. That plants are my friends. I don't eat my friends.
It's probably a good rule of thumb in
you shouldn't eat
a lot of aspects in life.
It's surprising how far you can go socially by just not eating your friends.
It's really true.
You just eat one friend, and
your reputation is shot.
Down,
You just eat one person.
I know. No forgiveness.
I don't know how we got here. It's okay. Well, we've done about 34 minutes, so we'll probably start wrapping up. But no, I enjoyed this conversation. I think it was just an interesting look into just a whole lot of different things.
Yeah, we just kind of shotgun.
It's okay. It's episode 1. That's how it's going to go. And
that's good. We get a widespread, and then later on in the future we can kind of narrow in.
We'll narrow it down. Yeah, and so I'll be interviewing a wide variety of plant people, but I would like to maybe have you back on a few times and pick one of these topics we shotgun today and maybe deep dive a little bit more. And
absolutely,
I'll do more of my own research. Maybe.
Yeah. Sounds great.
I should.
Let's do it.
So anyway, thanks Kyle for being here. Is there anything you want to plug? Do you want people to be able to find you online? Or would you rather hide?
That's the thing I've learned. The more anonymous I am, the less you get in trouble for stuff. So I can get away with more stuff.
Okay, so Kyle does not exist on the internet.
Just Google me. I'm hard not to find.
That's
actually.
True.
Kyle Tengler.
Just look for the beard.
There's a beard. Look for the beard. We'll see how long it is by the time this gets out.
It's editing Vikram here. I just wanted to pop in real quick and fill in something that I totally forgot to do. One cool thing we'll be doing at the end of our episodes is asking our guests what tip they have for you in your plant-related life. So I definitely forgot to do this because this was the first episode I recorded, and I think I decided I was going to do this after it had already been recorded and done. But I messaged Kyle and I asked him what one thing, if he could tell you to add value and meaning and success to your gardening life, what one thing would be the thing that he thought was most important. And what he said was that bare ground is bad. Don't have bare ground in your garden or on your farm or anything else. Cover it up with something, whether it's plant materials or mulch or cover crop or I don't know, you could go lay out there, put blankets and a mattress. Don't do that unless you really want to, I guess. But no bare ground. Bare ground is bad. Bare ground turns into dust. Dust blows, and that's how we get new deserts. So cover your ground, and you'll be so much happier and so much more successful in your garden and your landscape. Hey, thanks again for listening. You can find us online at planthropologypod.com or on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter just by searching for Planthropology. We'll come up with the green logo with the little white tree, and my name's on there somewhere, so you can find us. Hey, thanks for bearing with us through squeaky chairs and new audio engineering and just figuring out what's going on. I loved this episode, and I hope you loved it as much as I did. Any feedback you can give is much appreciated, and look forward to talking to you again on episode number 2, when we'll be hearing from another good friend of mine, Daniel Cunningham, and talking about water and education and all kinds of other cool stuff. Until then, thanks for being cool. Keep doing it. Stay curious and keep being nerdy about plants. Y'all are the best. Talk to you next time.